Hello everyone, my name is Gio Cyril Pudipara from Ashoka University, and I'll be presenting my paper Reimagining Social Media as Counterpublics, Lessons from Pinjra Tod Movement in India at the Media Meet 2020 conference being organized by Christ Deemed to be University. With one of the highest social media penetration among Asian countries, India, especially its youth, is becoming more active online by the day. This shift away from the physical space of activity has meant that many traditional offline tasks are now migrated to the cyberspace, including the political discourse. With even regular political debates of national political parties finding their way onto social media, the influence and impact of Facebook, Twitter, and the likes on the Indian socio-cultural landscape is immense. Governance model is witnessing a paradigm shift as the temporal and spatial responses to issues and concerns of the public have been done away with due to social media. Research by scholars have demonstrated the role of social media in shaping the modern expressions of dissent and protest. This has given rise to updated publics, which serves as the grounds for inclusion and empowerment of the historically marginalized sections. Movements like Justice for Rohit Vemla and the JNU Sedition Row have all been illustrative of these new dimensions that will dictate facets of social movements, particularly campus politics of today. This paper will explore whether social media has transformed the means and modes of student politics in India, such that it facilitates recognition of marginal voices. The problem statement is an attempt to understand whether social media activism is indeed a viable option for a channel of a difference, or is it just another gimmick appropriately titled Keyboard Warriors by some? After a careful review of existing literature on social media activism, the paper hopes to engage in discourse analysis of news reports and social media accounts to form the crux of its argument. However, it's important to note that there is limited precedence to such research in the South Asian context due to several factors, including political censorship. From Pinjra Tod's emergence as a political bloc within Delhi University during 2015, to its national mandate in recent years, the paper will focus on the role of social media, particularly Facebook and WhatsApp, in the whole movement. The paper particularly draws upon non-conventional sources due to the absence of any serious discussion or research on alternate movements within India by the mainstream media and civil society. This seems befitting the argument of this research, which aims to foreground how social media seems to have accorded such progressive movements a democratic space for engagement. Before we engage with the proposed hypothesis, let's understand the various parameters that will be employed in this research. Social media is considered inherently hegemonic, like other forms of media when it comes to ownership and interface structures. These two aspects revolve around one's class and gender, which determines an individual's access to social media. In addition to class and gender, India presents a unique third factor of caste, which shares a symbiotic relationship with class for most of the nation's population. These factors determine how much agency one can exercise on social media and whether the traditional structures that usually shackle individual expressions can be subverted online. Though social media has been recognized by many as a potential tool for political awareness, discourse, and opinion formation, and indeed as a catalyst for movements for social change, many also disagree and see a lack of potential for the same. Manuel Castells and several others have theorized, with the emphasis that the power these new modes of communication offer to challenge the status quo. But these claims have been criticized as too optimistic by quite a few, including Dijik. While Robert makes the point that social media mirrors existing power relations in society, Dipankar Sinha seems to have the perfect rebuttal in his article, where he makes the case for social media being a truly participatory and democratic communication channel, which it invariably is. But this again is in doubt for a few like Malcolm Gladwell, who are still skeptical about whether or not social media can truly drive social change. For Gladwell, online activism is an escape from high-risk activism, a sort of escapism that allows for freedom from responsibilities and repercussions. Shirky, on the other hand, believes that it is difficulty posed by social media for the state in terms of controlling power that makes it an ingenious vehicle for activism. While a lot of scholarly work has concentrated on social media's influence and impact on the political landscape at large, Most studies have been restricted to the Western governance models and hardly dealt with the third world countries such as India, except for few academics like Kovacs. It's important to also note that the social media's growing and biggest consumers are the youth, and none of the research so far seems to have exclusively studied this demographic subset. Therefore, this paper assumes significance as it tries to reconceptualize social media as a counterpublic that has emerged of late as a space for feminist expression, particularly among Indian university students who are becoming more and more conscious of their identities by the day. Nancy Fraser introduces the notion of counterpublics by its characteristics of multiplicity and plurality, which can help in developing an understanding of a world with multiple interests, sans the hegemonic discourse. By exemplifying these values, social media seems to successfully serve as counterpublics that allow for a self-reflexive awareness of marginal identities that can transform the participants. People at the margins often find themselves devoid of any agency that can enable recognition of their interests as the discourse is dominated by the center. Social media disrupts this natural order of agency by dismantling many traditional hierarchies of authority that cease to exist in the virtual domain. They reconfigure the fourth estate of democracy through a community-based approach that is much more democratic in relation to existing paraphernalia. Being an open access and no holds barred environment, at least in principle, social media accords use us with a sense of anonymity and detachment that enables certain restricted behaviors across class, caste, and gender markers. According to its Facebook page, Pinjra is an autonomous collective effort to ensure secure, affordable, and non-gender discriminatory accommodation for female students across Delhi. To quote an interview of a Pinjra member, the idea was for, quote, women to occupy the streets, the night, to reclaim what is ours, public spaces, unquote. It all began around August 2015, when Jamia Millia Islamia announced a diktat to its female students that they won't be permitted to stay out beyond 8 p.m. A student chose to address the issue head-on through an open letter to the Vice Chancellor, alleging a violation of her right to freedom, even as the Delhi Commission for Women was swift to question the necessity of such a restriction. The move provided the final impetus that was needed for the existing campaigns and pocket networks to transform into a full-fledged movement, and thus was born Pinjra Tod. Pinjra is an archaic literary euphemism representing the patriarchal notion of securing women, keeping us safely away from any temptation, or rather being the temptress herself. Pinjra Tod therefore espouses a sense of relatability within this resistance against discriminatory social order for many Indian women. The movement curated and deliberated with women across Delhi's various colleges and hostels before submitting a 45-page report to the DCWB in November 9, 2015. The demands included the constitution of an elected sexual harassment committee in all educational institutions, safer public transport facilities, well-lit campuses and approach roads, among others. The collective that operates without leaders or founders saw their intervention bring fruit as the University Grants Commission subsequently issued guidelines that laid out sexual harassment policies. The guidelines also banned any discriminatory dress codes or curfews imposed on female students, though most institutions have been lax in their implementation to date. However, the movement's pulse point was their persistent attack on the highly biased and blatantly patriarchal hostel rules prevalent across the capital. The movement was quick to produce facts that showcased that disparity was not just limited to different curfew timings for men and women, but also the exorbitant increase in hostel fees for the latter. On an average, the curfew timings were earlier by about 2-3 hours for women, while their hostel fees was about rupees 2,500 to 3,000 more than men, despite not being provided accommodation during summer vacations. By the following year, students from educational institutions across the country were active participants of Pinjra Tod. Women started making their presence felt through narratives about their suppression in a multitude of ways. The safety argument in favor of curfews was challenged by female students who found it a patriarchal structure enacted to restrict the mobility of women. The fight was no longer just about curfews, but about challenging the deep-seated social diktats that exclusively addressed women, their bodies and character, without any for the men. With the fight had come the fear of retribution and wrath of authority figures, be it faculty or management. Though the movement's wider recognition eventually meant students were less fearful in joining the struggle. Pinjra Tod, while an active socio-political movement, has stayed away from electoral politics in Delhi University to preserve their independence. With a clear stand to not align with any student factions or seek political affiliation with any particular group, the collective has emerged as a space of contention for student parties, particularly in Delhi University, as they either wish to dismiss them or co-opt them. The Akhilya Bharatiya Vidya Parishad ABVP has had several runs with the members of the movement, labeling the movement as anti-women and relaying threats via phone. For the ABVP, the agency of women with the movement can only be exclusively based on a leftist or a central leftist orientation, which is definitely not true. According to members of Pinjra Tod, the All India Students Association, ISA, though supportive, quote, is just a better alternative due to its sparse presence within Delhi University and its selective choice of women cadre, unquote. The constant internal bickering on various other issues also comes in the way of an organized association between the two. The National Students Union of India's NSUI's involvement within the movement has been quite minimal, considering their late inception in the political landscape of Delhi University. The chief accusation among all is that whether or not they dismiss or co-opt the struggle, all these parties during the electoral campaigns always include women's safety, surveillance, and access to healthcare products, despite their indifference to actual conversations around the same. Pinjra Tod has had many counterparts internationally, like the Fancy Women on Bikes based out of Istanbul and Izmir. This collective is a multifaceted subversion of female exclusion by Turkish women who dress up with striking makeup to address their erased visibility and reclaim their rightful place in the public domain. Across the border in Pakistan, we have girls at Davas in cities such as Karachi, Lahore, and Islamabad, where women are aiming to encourage female participation in moments of leisure. This seemingly trivial idea is, in fact, very pertinent when one realizes that men tend to outnumber women at almost all public spaces one comes across. Another such expression is the My Stealthy Freedom movement, which was started by Iranian journalist Masih Alinejad in May 2014. Women in Iran have had to cover their hair in public since the Islamic Revolution in 1979. Despite a matter that should be left to individual choice, the forced custom has resulted in an online archive of photos and videos voluntarily shared by women who violate the order. Similar to their women compatriots from Iran, the members of Pinjra Tod were quick to realize the importance of documentation and media archiving to inspire and reach women across physical and socio-cultural boundaries. Through photographs and videos shared on social media, the movement scaled its reach to unite the previously distant student community of the country and spurred similar protests across the Indian higher education landscape. This also includes blog posts and petitions to government agencies, both local and national, to initiate an institutional dialogue with policymakers and various other stakeholders. Social media and online news portals provided the movement with unprecedented visibility, unlike anything in the past. Pinjra Tod organized themselves for rallies, called for open meetings, and found solidarity through these modern-day platforms of social interaction. The 21st century media domain in India has been characterized by strict hegemonic features that not only discount any counter-narratives to their mainstream story, but also drown the stories from the fringes with sensational trash of the elite. Pinjra Tod chose to use social media to circumvent traditional methods and adopt this newly emerged medium to reach individuals across the socio-cultural spectrum. The movement has successful in emerging as a collective with no one face that represents them all, partly because of their mass participatory model that allows all members the agencies to express their opinions freely. The Facebook page provided to be a venue of awareness building and feminist discourse dissemination, catalyzing the movement through regular updates. Through WhatsApp groups formed exclusively with members of the movement and allies from the country, the women suddenly found solidarity in their regular day-to-day struggles against patriarchy and structural oppression. These groups provided a platform for many students to feel uninhibited and to inspire them to publicly challenge the status quo within the institutions they were part of. Petitions such as the ones launched on change.org that were addressed to the DCW, which eventually bore fruit with UGC issuing guidelines to the same effect, proved to the skeptics that even a social media mobilization could drive social change. Social media also diminished the authority wielded by educational institutions on students with regard to their expressions of dissent, as the space was beyond any censorship by authorities. The high risk associated with activism of inviting retribution from management or disagreeing peers was balanced out with the flat organization of the collective with no leader in front. Pinjra tapped into social media as a counter-public for feminist expression, especially as students were becoming more and more conscious of the biased societal norms by the day. By providing an avenue which was inherently welcoming of multiple views and plural opinions, social media helped the movement and its members develop an understanding of the Indian society while ensuring the representation of multiple interests. Social media was successful in empowering, at least partially if not fully, marginal voices in public by encouraging an acute reflection of their own lives and raising awareness about how systematic the hitherto unchallenged violence was. These women from the margins had finally found their agency on social media that enabled recognition of their interests away from the political discourse that was dominated by male majority student parties and their electoral ambitions. Pinjra disrupted this natural order of agency by producing a counter-public that existed out of the virtual domain and challenged the publics of the men that were drenched in their chauvinistic ideologies and patriarchal biases. They, in fact, reconfigured the political debate to be much more democratic in comparison with existing paraphernalia. Social media does mirror existing power relations in the society, and the same holds true for Pinjra and its initiatives as well. Pinjra has chosen to define itself as a feminist campaign that is different from the rest for being cognizant of other forms of discrimination, such as those based on caste and class. The contentious claim is what renders the movement unique to Uma Chakravarti, for it has, quote, localized the movement to reflect South Asian patriarchy, which ties in with the elements of caste, class, and the politics of reproduction, unquote. Similarly, Shilpa Patke believes that, quote, the presence of middle-class women on the streets at night fractures the lines between supposed good and bad women, unquote. Reading the two remarks together, one cannot but acknowledge the socio-economic capital that seems to have empowered certain women to lead this struggle. While Pinjra seems to be aware of the intersection of caste and class identities within the movement, it has not translated into an awareness strong enough to alter the methods of the collective. In choosing to embrace those who could break away from the shackles of imposed restrictions and not addressing the identities of those who are unable to do the same, the movement has recreated an unintended power relation within the domain itself. The movement's social media life hasn't been a smooth sail either. Apart from the regular misogynistic and sexual trolling, it also had its brush with censorship when Facebook shut down the Pinjra account back in 2016. The collective was scathing in their response for being singled out, despite the huge number of fake accounts and malicious pages that exist on Facebook. The swift redressal offered to someone who had reported the Pinjra account was in sharp contrast to the multiple reported complaints against right-wing trolls by students falling on deaf ears for months. This did not seem to provide the social media giant much leeway to justify their action by invoking due diligence. The collective condemned the, quote, highly problematic and non-accountable real name policy that was making all politically active individuals and groups a target, unquote. This is particularly true in the case of women as, quote, their safety given the surveillance, policing, and violence they face from families, societies, and institutions, unquote, was contingent on the anonymity that the social media provided according to them. Ravish Kumar, a Hindi journalist and noted editor at the NDTV, concurs that while social media has provided young women with the agency for political expression, they were now at the receiving end of huge pushbacks due to threats and trolling, according to his interview that was on YouTube. He is critical of how women are being forced to withdraw from cyberspace due to trolls and threats, and emphasizes the importance of strong female representation in the public domain, particularly media. From the case of Pinjra it is clear that social media has created a space for positioning yourself as a counter-public in opposition to the mainstream public discourse. In addition, the plural dimensions that make up the alternate media emerge from this discussion of social media as a viable counter to mainstream media. Collectives such as Pinjra accord agency to individuals previously bound by their identities and thereby challenge the patriarchal order of discourse. This renders even the corporate-owned platforms like Facebook and YouTube a makeshift emancipatory platform. Misogynistic tendencies and societal power concentrated with men have been challenged in the course of creation of such counterpublics. Social media activism has been generally considered a futile online chatter, has now in fact become the very instrument for resistance and the channel for political mobilization. Thank you for listening to me. I look forward to the question and answer session.